Um, the abuse that I had was very violent, and it really affected a lot of my life. And I am working on it a lot, at different times. Like I'll work on it a little bit, and then I take long breaks, and then I work on it a little bit, then I take more breaks. And the story of it is not my identity. It is just a story that happened. But in the beginning, all my life, a lot of my life, I felt like I was this thing that happened to me. And through therapy and healing modalities, I was able to take this ugly coat that I felt like I was wearing and put it out there. It was gone. So, thinking back on my story, took a long time because it was so long ago. It's like 40 years ago. Things were pretty good. I just tried to pretend my whole life that it didn't happen. Like I pretended that that was something over there, but then it's sort of I I stuttered actually. Now that I think about it, when I came out of the shelter, I stuttered, and then I know I felt like people. I felt just so small inside, and um, intimidated by people. Like I just felt less than. And I felt less than because of probably my mother bringing him back into the house. Like I didn't matter. I survived it. I learned, I adapted, I healed, and I do have, I think, some problems that I will probably always have, like the focusing problems sometimes. I don't like to be around anybody that is screaming or yelling. I get really upset. And I'm not around people like that. So, and I'm a pretty good diffuser of problems. You know, like if something's starting, I'm usually really good at putting the fire out. So,
Unfortunately, during this time being employed with the yacht club, I began to experience what I determined as sexual harassment. And then beyond that, bullying and retaliation about sharing with them the harassment that I was experiencing. And when I say share with them, I'm talking about my supervisors at the yacht club. So shortly after, actually, even upon being interviewed for them, I was made aware that there were a couple of people to watch out for, and that they, had issues in the past with these individuals. One was an employee, and one was a board member of the yacht club. And I'd say within just a few months of working there, both of them, the two individuals that I had been warned about, were making comments to me that I felt were inappropriate. Comments about what I was wearing, comments about me needing to be careful around them because I, was too attractive, too sexy, things of those nature. When I was wearing, jeans and a sweater. Um, and eventually, one of the individuals became a little bit more obvious about his attraction toward me, and at which time I addressed it directly with him and let him know that I wanted to, have a professional relationship. It was then that I noticed a change. And he no longer treated me, kind of with a friendly, flirtatious, and sexual undertone comments and actions toward me. Now it became more ominous and mean. He would call me names, like bitch, or that, I thought I was all that, don't listen to her. He also would sit up in our bar restaurant, which was, I could hear from our office. It was not far from the office. And he would have conversations with other members, other employees, and about me. And they would talk about me like, oh, I would, again, an example was, oh, she's hot. I would hit that. I would, have sex with her. And I could hear these things. I could overhear them. And then beyond, and I felt they were intentionally said to where I could hear them.
Sexual harassment is just defined as it's a conduct that's sexual in nature, that's severe or pervasive. And so it has a very simple definition, and but there's different, types of harassment. It could be physical, it could be verbal, it could even be visual. And so those are typically the types of sexual harassment that we see in the workplace. Same question. They're at work, it's going on. What do they do? Mm-hmm. Because most attorneys won't represent the employee in that situation until a very serious adverse action has taken place. And when I say adverse action, I'm talking about like a demotion, suspension, probation, or termination. And so what is the employee going to do in that situation? To me, the best advice is to professionally and respectfully submit something in writing. One, to the person who's harassing you. And if that doesn't, resolve the issue, then of course to somebody in HR or to the supervisor. And keep that written complaint. Mm-hmm. Hold on to that. So that's something that we all should do when we're in that situation.
I mean, Bill and I ran surrogate trainings together. Once I finished my degree, I got my doctorate, I started to train people to do what I've been doing for Bill and the office at the Wayne Counseling Center, and that we were starting then to put hands-on people. Bill and Dr. Nettleton believed in that you can't just sit across the desk and talk about some issues and concerns. And that was the role of the surrogate partner, is that she would walk a client through the neck down part. What's your relationship with your body? How do you get in touch with and allow feelings and sensations that might be scary or even traumatizing because of abuse or neglect or religious training? There's a lot of methodology out there and help for talking it out, like sitting across the desk and talking about trauma or abuse. And my work is getting into the body where the abuse or the trauma still is inside the cellular memory.
People are hungry for knowledge about their sexuality. And especially, I think, people of faith. I think that they have the most questions, the most kind of concerns about the way they were brought up and what we were giving them. And so that became then an important part of why I went into this field, because I just felt this is where I was called. Very much a part of my whole mission in life is to bring together people's sexuality and their spirituality, which may or may not include religion, because being spiritual is just asking questions of meaning. Whenever you ask a question of meaning, it's a spiritual question. I find it very important to have sex education for them together and learn together and learn how to negotiate what they like and what they don't like, and to be able to talk to one another about that, because that teaches them then to be comfortable in relating to a prospective partner later on, that So that I think it's really important to teach sex education where we're also teaching them how to relate to one another, how to communicate all this to one another, what I like and what I don't like, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, where I have questions and where I don't want to question. And so that kids become comfortable with who they are and where they are in their own belief system.
So I just want to make sure people understand sexual abuse doesn't always come from a broken home or from a family that is dysfunctional. It comes from all types of families, wealthy families. It's happening there as well. People just don't speak about it as much, you know? So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that sexual abuse is blind to economics. My mother was groomed first before I ever was. So this lawyer groomed my mother and basically told her that he could help with the diving expenses, but she would have to do it this way or she would never be able to help me. And so she said, oh, sure, great. So she basically handed me over to this lawyer. And then what the lawyer did was pass me around to other professionals who also provided special attention towards the family. So they would give doctor's appointments, eye exams, medication, whatever was needed was taken care of, as long as I was being dealt out, I guess you could say. But it's our denial that we keep ourselves stuck in this cocoon that keeps us from ever moving forward. And we will get safe in that. We'll feel safe in that cocoon. But the truth is that we're not really living. We're stuck. And people don't want to move out of that because they feel that this is safe. And a lot of victims have created strategies and tools to make them feel safe, that they're afraid that they can't leave that. But what they're still doing is keeping themselves stuck with the event still being the main focus.
My brokenness came when I was 17 and my dad passed away from stage 4 cancer. And 6 months after my father passed away, my abuser came into my life very methodically, very intentionally. He knew what happened in my life. And so my broken family, which really wasn't broken, but was kind of, I don't know, kind of cracked, I guess. That's when he came into my life. But I had a great childhood, loved my mom. My mom was awesome. My dad was awesome. But yeah, that's, well, 17 is when mine started. You know, I'm battling through it. But you know, it's kind of, I'm here and I'm doing this, and the more I talk about it and the more I speak, and, you know, it's become a lot easier to talk about it, and the anxiety's getting less and less, but, you know, I'm battling through it every day, just like everybody else is. As a guy, it's not supposed to happen to you. You're not supposed to let it happen to you. And I had so many people, I had a lot of people that had my back and had support, and they're all teammates, but then there was a lot of people, I read the comments after the article that were like, I would never let that happen to me. And until 6 or 7 months ago, you know, I didn't let this happen to me. Like, this wasn't my choice. It was, you know, I was groomed just as bad as my mom was. And, you know, if my dad had been around, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't happen. I don't know, but without him grooming my mom and my mom saying, okay, you can go spend a night with him. And then all the other stuff that happened behind the scenes with him of showing me porn and, you know, and kind of talking about sex and all that stuff, you know, when it came down to it, I finally said no, but I don't know why I said no. I really don't. I did. It didn't feel right because I wanted the first time with a woman to be special. That's really what it boiled down to. I didn't even know it was him. And I still didn't know it was him up until the article got written. I still denied it.
I think that the more these experiences are shared, the more light that's shined upon it, the more healing takes place, the safer all of society becomes. And we are creating safety for our children. The people who are doing this creating are heroes. Male survivors, female survivors, and those who care about them. That's creating change that is so necessary in the world. And it's not easy, it's not quick, it's often painful, it's often confusing, and it's often overwhelming. But it does get better. Recovery is real. And I know this because I keep seeing it repeatedly all over the world. Men and women actively engaged in recovering from the brutality that they experienced as children. Because I can't think of any other people I would rather be spending my time with than heroes. And, you know, in the face of all the odds, survivors are heroic. Survivors are heroes.
And my son was, I would call it a victim of inappropriate touch and body boundary crossing. And he actually told the mom, and she didn't help him. So during that night, I got this instinct that something was wrong, but I didn't follow my instinct. I told myself, oh, it's just you're tired. You just had a baby. The kids are fine, whatever. And in the morning when I went to pick him up and I saw the look on his face, he ran at me crying. I dropped my coffee, everything crashed. And then it hit me like, okay, something terrible happened. He told me what happened. But then like everything from my past kind of bubbled up in one giant catastrophic emotional storm. So I took my son home, told him thank you for telling me, because I did talk about body safety with him beforehand. And I had given him a little bit of prep work, but I never anticipated that it would happen from a friend. I was kind of under the assumption that this type of thing only happened from like the creepy guy in the van, or, just like those stereotypical myths that you think. And I had no clue it would ever happen with another child. And so I didn't know what to do, but he was traumatized. He felt trapped and scared that he couldn't get in touch with me. This was before cell phones. This was back in 2004. So this was a very long time ago. And so basically we went to the doctor to ask, I called the pediatrician. I'm like, what do I do? Like, this happened. He's upset. And my pediatrician at the time said, well, you know what? If you just stop talking about it, he'll stop talking about it. And I was like, I don't think so. But so I tried to stop talking about it for like a day, and he wanted to talk about it. And then I said, let's write about it. So we both started journaling. He would draw pictures, and some of them were like angry and sad pictures of his friend. And he would write, and I, dictate, and I would write for him, and he'd try to make little words. But in the whole process, I realized that he felt like it was his fault. And he felt like he was the stupidest kid in the world, was one of the things he said. And we just started talking and creating different scenarios that kind of empowered him, because he was like, oh, here's what I would do if this happened to me, or here's what I would do if that happened, like kid actual scenarios. So because we did all that thinking and generating like what if strategies, I noticed that he was coming up with these ideas himself, and that was really empowering. And then he wanted to take it to help other people, because we realized we had a lot of really good information here. So he was involved the whole time.
I didn't understand that my life was out of order until I was about 45 years old. And when I was about 45 years old, this is kind of where my journey really started. I had been in marriage counseling for about 5 years. I was still incredibly depressed. And I recall a specific day, I had picked my children up from school and I sat down on the bottom of the steps. They'd had their snacks and they'd done their homework. And I was holding my 8-year-old son's hands. And I was looking in his eyes. And I just knew in my heart that my life was shrinking, that I was leaving this life. I'm very careful. I was not suicidal, but I wanted to die. And I had to make a conscious decision in that moment because I knew I couldn't do that to my children or my family. And I made a conscious decision that I would quit drinking and that I would start digging deep. I decided at that moment, there's something inside of me. I've tried to fix all the outside things and it's not working. There's something inside of me. So I sat down and I started writing from the very beginning. And it was at that moment that I realized that I had been sexually abused by an older sibling from age 6 to 12. And I think that's another reason that families don't report. Parents feel shame and embarrassment and they feel alone. That's the thing. We need parents to understand that this is a silent epidemic and that they are not alone and that they are embarrassed. They are afraid to come forward as well. And they love both of their children. What do you do? I think the biggest thing is that if we report it, I think Stop It Now particularly walks you through a reporting process and get both of your children help, both of them, get the whole family help.
And at the time also, it was like, where were my parents? There was nobody watching out for me. I'd spent the night out all night by myself, come in the early morning. There was nobody there watching out for me. And which led me to the next one, my next sexual assault, where there was a man up the street. And also during this time, I was a teenager. I had hormones surging. I was very, very, had lots of energy, was very like active, but really the only outlet I had was swimming, was in a local pool. And so with these other assaults that I had, I started having this kind of like this desire and this like an adrenaline rush from danger, secrets, and intrigue. And I started living a completely double life. On the outside, I looked like a nice Catholic girl. My parents had no idea what was going on. Signing up for the sex coaching program, it was almost like a natural evolution for me to become a sex coach. When I did my expressive arts degree, my master's in expressive arts, my thesis was about Eros on the road to recovery. I worked with veterans who were in a drug and alcohol residential facility. And it was all about using the senses and the sensory input and how that can be helpful to stay present and can be helpful for recovery. So it was a natural evolution for me to be where I am today. Mm-hmm. And all the healing that I've done. And now I have the opportunity to use my story, to use what I've learned to help other women.
This is really the first time I have shared my trauma story in person. So, and I think like all of these layers of experiences were starting to really erode my sense of self. I felt horrible about myself. I wasn't going to school. I just had no interest. And I was also doing drugs. I was smoking a lot of pot. I wasn't getting addicted to, I wasn't getting addicted to drugs, but I was doing drugs, and these experiences drove me to kind of understand that there was more to life, and like, how do we live that? Like, how do I live that? How do I live as an enlightened being? How do I live in a way where I can experience this deep peace and experience higher states of consciousness? It's a journey, and I would call it the journey of the wounded healer. I think that most of us who are healers, we've been wounded, and so we learn how to heal ourselves, and as we heal ourselves, we learn how to heal others. And so I'm constantly doing things, like when I notice that something, like I feel a little bit out of balance, I'll go to therapy, I'll go to EMDR, I'll do another training to learn how to process what.
It started out, I came from a history where there was a lot of sexual abuse and sexual molestation happening at a very, very young age. I started at 4 years old and went until I was about 11 or 12. And then I did have a little bit of a break. I endured many different types of abusive relationships because I was stuck in a horrible cycle. Whenever I was 30 years old, my husband at the time passed away, and that left me in a very vulnerable condition. And I ended up in a narcissistic relationship, mental abuse happening. And I didn't really realize what was going on until a few years in, whenever my youngest daughter just kind of, I was tucking her in bed one night and she literally said, "Mommy, I want a new daddy." And that was like the most devastating thing in the world to me, because I was super close with my youngest daughter. And for her, whenever your child looks up and says something like that, it's really, really a wake up call, and it's devastating, because that's when you know that it's happening to more than just you. Stop second guessing yourself. If you feel that you're being abused or manipulated in some way, you probably are, and you need to reach out to therapists. And it never hurts to just reach out and talk to someone. Call a crisis line, call the national rape line, call the domestic violence lines, and just talk to someone. That is your first step. The more you talk, the more you'll understand yourself and what is going on around you, whether it is or is not abuse. Most of the time, if you're feeling like that, it probably is. And there is a way to escape, and it's worth it. You don't have to stay chained up in that forever. There's a beautiful life waiting for you, because once you get through this, life's a lot more beautiful. The sun even seems brighter.
But it really got me on this path of thinking about how the Christian church specifically is often responsible for inflicting religious trauma on people. And how can we reconcile that and try to help people heal and grow and give them sex positive messages, because I know that God created us as sexual beings. And so there's a lot of healing to do in this area. And as a minister, that's part of the work I feel called to. I'm always interested in talking about sex. I'm very comfortable talking about sex, and that seems to be a pretty rare thing for clergy. So I want to use that gift to broaden the conversation so that more people feel free to talk about sex. It's an issue that is part of all of our lives. And I think the more discussions we have about it, the more that we can all be on a healing journey.
One thing I share with Priscilla is that one of the things that's really important for me about this is not only the other stories I've heard from, other women that were interviewed about, purity culture's impact on them, which have been really helpful to me, but also that, sharing experience can just be, an important point along your own personal journey of healing and, coming to a new understanding about about your feelings about sexuality and life really in general. So, I started receiving these messages right around the time that, my kind of sexual development was also starting, right? Like age 12 or so. So it was kind of a critical time, 12 to 17, 12 to 18. And then what happens is, you're racked with guilt for a while, but you also do kind of get older, more mature. There are some things where you drop some of the fears and concerns because there's aspects of this issue that just feel like a part of normal adult life. But I think for me, I still never really reconciled the conflict. I just kind of, I just would kind of I would just compartmentalize it basically and feel like, okay, well, that's not something I still believe, but I don't know what it is that I do believe. And I don't, and I certainly wasn't thinking about the ways in which my sexuality was still impacted. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I haven't done anything like this before and might not again, I'm not sure. But the point is, maybe I will though. I think it's open a door for me. So again, I am grateful for platforms like this that give people an opportunity to tell their stories. I think that's important. That's it.
How do you feel about talking about it?
I was nervous initially, and I'm one of those people who I'm not going to know how I really feel probably until like tomorrow morning. I'm going to wake up and be like, did I just do that? Did I say those things? But I think a mixture of, yeah, it's exciting. It's a little nerve wracking. But no, I feel good. And I mean, I would say that the things that others shared were definitely validating. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not alone, for sure.
Right.
All this is happening around, yes. And we're here to support you, what you do, and I think you should share your message with everybody who wants to listen. And that's what we do here. So we give people a platform, and I think every time you share, you become freer.
Right.
So you release all that emotion that's stored in you for a long time, and the more you talk about your story, the better healing process. And